Welcome to this episode of Inside Legal ESG. We are so pleased to have with us today the Chief Executive and founder of Lawyers for NetZero, Adam Woodhall. Welcome, Adam, and thank you so much for agreeing to be part of our podcast discussion series.
Delighted to be with you, Pamela, and with your audience.
Wonderful. So let's get started. I would love for you to tell me about Lawyers for NetZero. How did this even come to be?
Well, Lawyers for NetZero, our aim is actually to focus exclusively on in-house lawyers, which will be part of the story that I'll give you. And also we go beyond net zero. So what we're interested in is the whole sort of environmental field, which can include plastics and other climate issues and lots of things. And we realized that Lawyers for NetZero is a fairly snappy title. And that's why actually our subheadline is Lawyers for NetZero, climate and ESG leadership for GCs and their teams. So it's that gives you the headline of what we are. And now, there was a few things which kind of like stimulated us to kind of like build and grow Lawyers for NetZero. The first was the recognition that in-house lawyers have a really influential position within organization, which is partially based on the fact that they are the chief legal officer in an organization, particularly the GCs. And it actually goes way beyond that, because increasingly GCs are being asked to look at things around risk, reputation, compliance. And through that, actually, they're being seen as a kind of trusted business advisor. And so what that is that then is an opportunity for them to use that influence to then focus on areas, because obviously lawyers kind of more typically can be seen as something that's about defending the current company's practices and where they're at. Now, obviously, the in-house lawyer will be responsible for doing that, but where the real opportunity is for the in-house lawyer to be more proactive, constructive, forward-thinking, and helping the company be part of the transition to an economy and a society which delivers a livable planet for all. Because all businesses can contribute to this, some obviously more than others. And it's both. So it's both. This is going to be good for the planet if the GCs are getting behind this, but it's particularly good for the businesses because we are transitioning, and we are transitioning fast. So, and then underneath that, there's some other sort of aspects of why we are passionate about how we work with the in-house counsel, and particularly the GCs. But I'll maybe save that for later in the conversation.
Yes, leave some questions for me. So what year did Lawyers for NetZero get started, and what prompted you to start it at that time?
Yeah, so first kind of started investigating into the area in 2020. And it's a lot of that was because I've been involved in climate issues for over 15 years now. But in 2020, I had a realization that effectively, even though there was things such as Extinction Rebellion happening, which was particularly big in the United Kingdom, and you've had the Sunrise Movement in the United States and other sorts of things going on. What was happening is that if you do an opinion poll, even in America, which is obviously polarized, you'd still get maybe 60% of the population saying, yes, we should take action on climate. And in other countries, even higher percentages. But then when you looked, and then also, are you worried about it? People are very worried about it. But when you looked at the actual reality of it, this is an existential. It's not just one existential threat. There's numerous existential threats related to environmental degradation. And effectively, most people were kind of like saying, yes, this is a problem, but what can I do? And that's a lot to do with the fact that currently we're in a society which is, for most people, most of the time, actually it's fairly comfortable. Now, obviously, there are people where things aren't comfortable and are difficult, and I don't want to denigrate from those challenging situations for those people. But for many people, it's actually quite comfortable. So there's this very big cognitive dissonance where we see the problem, but we don't feel the problem. So effectively, that's why, for example, things like the Sunrise Movement or Extinction Rebellion, it got lots of people. There was actually quite a lot of people supporting it and going, "Oh, that's great! You should do this." Especially the early days. It's maybe changed a bit over time, but actually very few people joined those movements proactively to do things that on the streets, especially the more Extinction Rebellion kind of like things which are sort of rebellious, truly rebellious. Now, obviously, was never thinking that we were going to be getting lawyers to glue themselves to roads, as has happened in the UK. Absolutely not. But what it is the realization that many people care deeply about making change. And many people also work for organizations that have made these grand and big and important pronouncements around net zero goals or net positive or whatever it might be, or plastic reduction. But what was happening is many people were like, that's somebody else's job to deliver on, isn't it? Because I'm an accountant, I work in marketing, I'm a lawyer. It's not my job to do it. If this was like we're talking about something like GDPR, then okay, it's fine. You can leave something that's kind of like that to somebody else. And because we're in siloized organizations, actually that means that people can be you can't be everybody everywhere. But the thing is the need for the rapid climate transition and other sort of related environmental transitions are so important, both on a business level and on also a societal level, that actually we need all those influential people, whether it's the CFO, whether it's the head of marketing, or whether it's the GC and their team, to be helping drive this. But we're in a societal context which kind of says, yeah, that's somebody else's job. It's like the head of sustainability, or it's the government's, or somebody else. Mm-hmm. So what our sort of realization was that we want to support this unrealized position of influence that the GC and their team has to leverage and drive their climate transition in their organization for business reasons as well as the societal reasons. Because obviously you want to avoid litigation, you want to avoid falling foul of regulation, but also there's many opportunities business can take. So it's really understanding all of that and putting it together. And again, that's still something that's not as easy to do as it is easy to realize. But even just the realization is what my feedback is there's not many people that have actually realized that.
I agree with that. And I will also say that I have seen some GCs who really do not want to take this on, not because they don't believe in it, but for fear of lack of resources, or what do I know in order to do it right and deliver it correctly. So my question is, what kind of receptivity did you get when you first started reaching out to get general counsel and other in-house lawyers to become part of Lawyers for Net Zero?
Right.
And do you have a membership model? Do you have a subscriber model? Tell me about the structure and how you attract members, for lack of a better word.
Yes. So what we've got is like you needed the first two realizations, which is that people were not realizing that they could have an influence, and then secondly, in-house lawyers have a particularly good opportunity, and really nobody was paying much attention to them. So and then what it is though is like, how do you deal with this? Well, what it is that and understandably, because the climate crisis is so present, a lot of people want everybody to be converted yesterday. Mm-hmm. And whilst yes, if we had some sort of mind machine that's been teleported back from like the year 3000, yes, we might be, but we don't. So what we've got to work with is humans and society and culture as it is. But what has happened is actually there has been rapid shifts within certain areas in a constructive way that we can also learn from. So a really good example is actually, whilst there's still challenges around what I'm just going to talk about, so I don't want to denigrate any sort of challenges that are still there, is if we look at LGBT sort of situation, because effectively in the early 1990s, globally, it was still pretty difficult to be a gay person in most countries, including what we might call developed countries, the United States, Europe, etc. And then what actually happened is various sort of groups in the UK and the US, particularly actually it was, and then some on continental Europe, worked out how to get change happening. And so what was fascinating, just to give an example, is that we went from in the mid 90s, it was still effectively illegal to be gay in the Republic of Ireland, to then by the mid 10s, so just over 20 years, you had a gay out prime minister who was living with their partner, and nobody even peeped about it. Now, there was obviously other context around it. It wasn't just one thing that led to it, but that was a vast and radical transformation. And if you just sat down with a pint of Guinness in a pub in Dublin in 1992 and said, you know what, you're going to have a gay prime minister in 25 years, you might not have got a very good response.
Right.
So what it is that we can take inspiration from that. But that didn't happen because overnight suddenly everybody got this. What happened is it became an increasing thing. So what we're really passionate about is how do we use the best and the most proven behavioral insights and those from neuroscience, etc., in how you help society change. So one of the key ones is there's this concept called the diffusion of innovations, which has been popularized by the term early adopters. And everybody says, oh, you need early adopters. Well, actually, what you really need is what they call in the literature innovators, but actually even before the what we call very early adopters. So it's effectively people, the very early adopters are those people who just naturally, just go, that sounds great, I'll give it a go. So it was that, if you give an analogy, it's the sort of person who would have been turning up outside the Apple store on the day that the iPhone was launched. They had no clue whether it would be any good or not, but I want to give that a go. Let me at it. And then what you have is then you have the early adopters who their friends bought an iPhone and they were like, that seems pretty cool. I'll give it a go because you've tried it, and so I trust you. And then the early majority, which is about a third of the population, they need to see quite a lot of their friends or their community doing it. And then you have the late majority, about another third, who are like, I need to see lots of evidence. And then there's the laggards, the changeaverse, who are just like kicking and screaming. They've probably still got a Nokia. Now you can apply this process to any change. So that applied with the LGBT in terms of how politicians and decision makers were kind of initially very resistant, in fact, actually opposite to LGBT rights, to the point where, in the UK, we had it was a conservative government which made gay marriage legal. Now, actually, it was a conservative government just over 20 years previously, that basically was banning any conversation about LGBT in schools, etc. So, things can change really radically quickly. So we're really passionate about how do you get that. So just to go back to your point, is what we did is we focused on how do we get those, and what we already do is just let's trust that there's going to be some of those very early adopters out there. And so what I did is just kind of went basically knocking on virtual doors through LinkedIn and things like that, and then said, hey, would you like to join our pilot? And so people said, yeah, sounds. Some people were like, not sure, but enough did say, yeah. I'd like to join a pilot. And some of those are still our champions, like the general counsel of Nestle,
Mhm.
general counsel of Eon, a big energy company. Um, and so they have actually, so they were willing to give it a test. And then what's happened is that because they've got that, then obviously they're the people that are on our website. And then we kind of we'll do other events with them. We ask them to be on panels that we do with, because then that people are seeing is not just that lawyers, that lawyers net zero is something that maybe we should be associated with, but more importantly, is that actually leaning into taking action on these issues is something that actually a business leader can be doing. And if a GC wants to be a kind of a leader in their business, this is actually just something that you need to be doing.
Right, right.
And so what it is that by using that sort of diffusion of innovations and trusting that there will be people out there that'll be interested in it, then you can start to build and build and build.
And so to the extent you have people that were there from the beginning, as well as new members joining or becoming aligned with Lawyers for Net Zero, how do you balance the competitive position versus the collaboration position? Are there concerns for, well, what am I sharing and what are other GCs learning from me because I'm sharing this about my company's position?
Yeah, it was quite interesting. There's been genuinely zero concern expressed.
Excellent.
The only people, there's been a few people that have been kind of advisors who've gone, ooh, might this be a problem?
Mm-hmm.
But when it can actually to the sessions themselves, what we've done is actually the processes is what we created through piloting it and what we pilot learn. We've created what we call the impact accelerator, which uses a process which we call group coaching plus. So because it effectively works at 4 different levels. So there's the top level is what you'd expect something like Lawyers Net Zero to do, which is what I'm actually doing today with you, Pamela, which is sectoral advocacy. It's letting the whole world know that something is important and that we need to do something about it. We need to take action. And so that's through podcasts, conferences, articles, etc., etc. That's really important. And that's just the starting point. And obviously we did that, at the start of Lawyers Net Zero. But where the impact accelerator it comes into its own is there's like 3 other key stages to how you generate change. Is what within our impact accelerator we have a network, a community of all our sort of impact accelerator participants, who we also call champions, um, who can communicate to each other. They've got a champions database, so they can kind of find out about who the other people are, what those other people are experienced in, what industry they're in, etc. So we can contact them. And we've got some other tools to enable them to talk, as well as we've got like WhatsApp chats and things like that. But actually, some people might think that's enough, but unfortunately, what it is busy people won't necessarily most of the time get up and start to connect with their peers because they're just so busy.
Mm-hmm.
So what's really important is the next layer is the our small group process, which is why we call it group coaching plus, because those are groups of typically 4 GCs or 4 mid-ranking in-house counsel and what we do is it's really important that it's curated so that those individuals, it makes sense as to why they're in a group together, because particularly it's actually particularly about status. So the GCs want to be in a group with GCs, and even though we've got some groups with more mid-ranking lawyers, even though they might like to be in a group with GCs, it actually what you're doing is different. So it's really important that you feel as that. So then what actually happens is that people, it actually is really motivational for them and really helpful for them, because what they do is they take our net zero action principles, which have about 50 actions within the principles, and they choose 2 or 3 of them to work on within the scope of a cycle. A cycle for us is 3 or 4 months. And then what they do is then we give them the tools to basically prioritize which 2 or 3 actions they're going to focus on, how they're going to turn those into outcomes that are reasonable for them, and then what steps they're going to do for that. And then the really important thing is they get this kind of they both get the mini network of their 3 other participants in the group of 4. They get that facilitated by one of our experienced facilitators, and they meet regularly for this kind of small group coaching process. But also they can loop into the wider network as well for other questions, as well as we give them individual work to do, because obviously, it's and we've actually had this experience that it's really easy to get people to basically use a term, pontificate about what we need to do. It's actually much more difficult to get people focused on what action you can do, and the reason is because we're human. Because actually, it's like it's either hard, or you don't know, or you're lacking in confidence about it, or whatever it might be. So guess what? It's going to be easier just to say, oh yeah, we should be doing this, or the company's doing that, etc., etc. So what we've tried to do is flip that. Actually, if you see other people like you, literally just like you, other GCs in other big companies, or other mid-ranking lawyers in the financial services, whatever it might be, you've got this opportunity to be able to feel open and honest. And interestingly, going back to your kind of like this starting question, nobody's ever, because we say this is Chatham House rule, but the thing is that because they're not sharing kind of trade secrets type thing here. But it's actually that it's because they're dealing with other humans. Now it's mediated through teams, never get to meet physically, but you can rapidly build a relationship. And it's particularly when you're sharing that. Sometimes people are sharing their challenges. So it's like almost like sometimes like a group therapy session. Sometimes you're sharing your successes. So it's like cheerleaders for each other. Well done. But then obviously then it's like the core of it, the kind of main stage is the individual action, what they're doing, not in these because the sessions are great for us to kind of talk and inspire and motivate and network and learn from each other. But really what matters is what you're doing engaging with this. So the additionality that you're adding to your career, your job, because you're learning lots, it's great for your profile, etc., but also really importantly what you're doing for your company. And then that will naturally have some benefits outside as well. So these 4 levels, you need to work at the sectoral level, you need to create a community, you need to have the small groups so people can really connect with the people, and then you need the individual level support. You need all 4 levels. And because in the in-house legal sector, we recognize that effectively there was nobody cohesively doing any of the 4. So we were like, right, okay, we're going to have to do all 4. Now you can have other situations where different players, different stakeholders deliver at different ones. So, but effectively, the kind of the neuroscience, the behavioral insight is you have to have all 4 being effective if you want rapid, meaningful, sustained action.
Yep. And I guess I know the answer to this question, but I'll affirm it in case our audience is questioning the same thing. Do all of your member companies have to be on a net zero path? Do they have to have declared net zero, or can your membership companies be on all stages of the continuum?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a really important question, because some people might be almost feel intimidated that particularly if they work for a company which might be seen as kind of part of the problem, and or if it doesn't have any clear goals. So obviously it's kind of easier if your company has some sort of narrative around taking climate action, taking sustainability seriously. But interestingly, if we contrast, say, the world's biggest sort of renewable energy company and the world's biggest, or one of the world's biggest fossil fuel sort of suppliers, companies, which is, if we're going to focus on where our maximum impact could be, where should we focus? Well, it's pretty obvious. It's the fossil fuel company, because the fossil fuel company has to transition. Now, they either transition as fast or they either transition faster than they think is possible, or they transition as slow as they think is possible. And in fact, actually, what we need all companies to be doing is transitioning faster than they think is possible.
Right.
But actually, just like if we go back to the LGBT situation, nobody would have thought that we could have had that transition as fast as we did, and then suddenly things started happening, like with almost unbelievably so in some ways. Now there's still a journey to go with that. There's still, and obviously we're having lots of things around transgender issues, etc., going on at the moment, which have started to kind of confuse things in some ways. But I think if we look at where we were, and where we've got to, it's really quite a big transition. And that's, I think, the other narrative is that it's when you have rapid societal change, just as happening actually with LGBT, things can get messy, and that's can be very challenging for some of those people at the core of that situation. And I really honour those people that are working around those areas. And it's the same with climate issues. Is that there's some people that, understandably, because everything from that are a coal miner in West Virginia, and that's been their job, and it's been their dad's job, and it's been their granddad's job. Suddenly you're asking them to change that, or all through to that. You're the CEO of one of the world's biggest oil companies, and you've been working in an oil company since you left university. It's like people get attached to things, but basically, and that means that some people can defend, some people can try and attack to defend. But actually, where the real opportunity for the savvy kind of business leaders of the future is to work out how in their context they can start to use their influence to drive the momentum. Whether you're starting from a place where the maximum you have is an environmental policy and something on the website, or whether you're seen as an absolute world leader. Because as has been shown just recently, Danone, they've just very recently had a case brought against them, and Danone are seen as one of the leading companies when it comes to sustainability, but they're still up in court with a case being brought both of them by Client Earth. Now, I'm not going to get into the whys and wherefores as to how fair that is, but the thing is what it demonstrates is that some people are thinking that Danone is nowhere near where it needs to be. And if you look at the plastic problem that we've got, there's some validity to that. Now, whether it's Danone's responsibility, that's another thing. But actually, we might say that the more we lean into this, the more that can change so rapidly.
I like your comment about how when things are changing rapidly, things get messy. And I think that is exactly what's happening in the US right now with the politicization of ESG and this rapid movement to, a more sustainable, more just society. But I think what will emerge is, to your point earlier, how quickly can we transition to ensure a livable planet for all? Right? Because we really don't have any options, right? So that's an excellent point you've made. My last question for you is, give me a prediction of what's in store for Lawyers NetZero for 2023 and 2024.
Yeah, so what we're really passionate about and interested in is how do we help society change, really. So what we're very interested in is both two things. How do we get to work with the most influential individuals that are within our sort of stakeholder group? So that will be the GCs at the biggest organizations. Now, all in-house lawyers can potentially help us with that, and all private practice lawyers can also potentially help us with that, because even if you work in a smaller organization, or you're kind of like low down in the organization, you can work out how you could be sort of helping us get in touch with some of these elite GCs. Because what we've particularly found is that if an organization, even if it has holistically a very robust, in fact, sustainability program, if the leader of a department, in this case, obviously the legal team, isn't personally motivated or interested in it, it's very difficult for a mid-ranking individual to get action happening.
Right.
So the thing that we really focus on is actually is that if somebody who's listening today is working as a mid-rank in a decent-sized organization, I'd love to join Lawyers for NetZero. What we want to do is talk to you, but talk to you also about how we can over time enroll. It might not be a GC might not get it, but maybe a deputy GC or somebody, a territorial GC, somebody who gets it, that we can start the process of making it so that the legal team is fit for a future. That in the future is like a transitioned economy to a climate friendly one. And so what is that our vision is that we are working with many high status general counsel, first of all in our kind of home territory in the UK, but also we've already got GCs from Asia, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and Standard Chartered, based out in Asia, and also we've worked with GCs who are based in Brazil, in continental Europe, in the United States. So we're definitely looking to kind of grow. So basically by the end of 2024, it's that what's happened is because we've gone for this kind of like the top level, then we've got an opportunity to kind of like percolate it and cascade it down, because what we absolutely encourage our GCs who join the Impact Accelerator to do is bring in their team members to also join the Impact Accelerator, because the GC has to be good at delegating and they can't do all the things that need to be done. So what it is that we can, all those kind of goodies that I talked about earlier on that we can provide, that can be both great for the GCs, but also for the mid-ranking lawyers who can then work with their kind of peers to help drive the action from their level. But it kind of needs to be a team effort. But you need somebody to be leading it, and that needs to be the GC or certainly somebody at that very high level. And then it's like, how do we cascade that down?
And the beauty of that model is those that are at mid-rank right now are going to grow up together, knowing each other and having worked together towards this ultimate goal. So it really is a great way to sustain the work that's being done, is to involve the whole teams and get them to know each other in these small groups. That's a fabulous idea. So I want to have you back at the end of 2024 and we'll assess how well this has all gone. Thank you so much for your contributions today. I'm sure our listeners have learned a lot. I particularly learned and was reminded how important the psychology of all of this is, because we're trying to make systemic societal change. And to your point, that doesn't happen overnight. So thank you so much for all the hard work you're doing. Thanks to all of your members. Presumably those who are interested in more information can go to lawyersfornetzero.com.
Correct. And also, we've got a LinkedIn page and you can connect with me, Adam Woodhall, via LinkedIn as well. I'd be delighted to connect with anybody that's interested.
Thank you so much again for your time. And I will definitely have you back on a future Inside Legal ESG podcast. Thank you.
Brilliant.